All right, well, I'm just going to kick off with a couple of comments. We may have a few people that join us as we get into the early parts of this conversation. Would just love to thank you all for joining. This is something that we do at Archer Career, and it's really a treat for me, and I hope that it is the same for all of you, because I get a chance and others on our team to talk with some business professionals that we know. They have amazing career stories, very inspirational, aren't afraid to talk about challenging things that they faced in their career. And so in a moment, I'm going to hand this over and have Lee introduce himself. But just by way of a quick introduction, what I want to do is begin our conversation with my friend Lee Clark. And there's a few reasons why I wanted to have Lee, really be the spotlight of this conversation. I've known Lee a long time. I've known his career path. I know him as a person. I dare say I know the family and the kids, and just a person who I think has navigated career and life with elegance and smarts, and very, very committed and passionate to the work that he does in and around healthcare. And I think I don't need to say more about that because I think in this conversation for the next 50 or so minutes, you all are going to see that for yourself. Lee, I'm going to let you fill in a little bit more, and can you tell us about the career journey you've had? Not quite the resume walkthrough, but
Yeah,
something in that direction.
yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here and nice to chat with you. But I have to say, first of all, I wish there had been something like this when I had kickstarted my career in my MBA program, a nice supporting resource to really kind of help really kind of guide me along, which is interesting. So I can start there. My path, and I won't do my walkthrough with my resume, but I originally started my career out of undergrad in higher education administration, and so I originally kind of started undergrad with a passion in healthcare and science and was pre-med and decided I was going to pause that for a moment to pursue other passions. And I come from a background, my family is in the helping profession. I come from a lot of ministers, educators, healthcare professionals as well. And so I kind of landed in a career where I was really kind of passionate about helping young adults really kind of navigate their college experience, realizing their potential, understanding who they were, and then really kind of launching out. And so there's a lot of planning and thinking and development. So I got my master's degree in higher education from Indiana and really enjoyed that aspect uh, of my career. And I was working in the business school at Washington University when I kind of had one of those moments where I just finished working with a lot of young people talking about their career paths. What are they going to do? And there was something that kind of spoke to me in that moment. And I said, I don't know if I'm really completely done with my own career path. What else am I missing out on? And I circled back to that love of healthcare, love of science and medicine, and kind of did my due diligence, asked my friends who were doctors, would you do this again? Would you go into that path? And a lot of them said no. And primarily what kept coming up was the fact that the system was broken. There are things that just don't work that make this really hard to be a good doctor. And one of my friends said, if you have any way to fix the system, you would be you'd be saving us all a lot of headache. I took that to heart and I really started looking at that and really thinking, what can I do that's going to allow me to satisfy this passion for healthcare and yet kind of also fix the system, which is when I landed on getting my MBA. And so that was when I decided to actually turn my career around, which was a big jump, going from education into consulting and primarily healthcare consulting. Um, so I did a lot of homework, did a lot of research, landed in a program that I really felt was going to meet my needs as a budding professional, someone turning their career around into a different pathway. Um, and there was a lot of work doing my MBA. So not only was it just doing the core work, doing the coursework, but really kind of strategizing and learning to reposition myself, learning translatable skills, learning a new language, if you will, to really kind of focus myself, which I was lucky enough to land an internship in consulting. I was one of, I believe there were two or three of us out of my class who wanted to go into consulting at a particular firm. So I landed one of those roles. Um, and from that point on, it took off. And I was able to also get a full-time offer, and then really kind of started to shoot for the stars in that area. Um, Throughout my healthcare career, which is probably going about 23 years now, I'm dating myself. That's a long time. I
We
know.
all do.
So I've had a number of different experiences, not only kind of doing consulting in the Big Four, but I've also been able to work in more niche consulting experiences. I've taken a couple of pit stops off of the consulting path to go into industry,
Mm.
which is very, very beneficial in some regards. And so I can talk a bit about that later on. And so I call it my circuitous um, career path. And so after kind of making these stops along the way, I realized that I really enjoyed the um, variety of the consulting lifestyle in terms of having a lot of different projects. But I also wanted to find something that fit my lifestyle. And so I was able to land a role in my current role in Blue Cross Blue Shield Illinois in an uh, internal consulting organization where now I have the best of all worlds. I can do consulting and I actually run the group. So I'm kind of the head partner, if you will. So I run this group and we consult for all of our health plans. There are five of us in this holding company. I don't have to travel. I tell everybody else where to travel. Um, but I get the same kinds of work that I used to do at Deloitte, an example. And uh, I also get a chance to actually have a life. I got a good work-life balance. I get to see my kids during the week, and then kind of satisfy all those different itches, which has been a godsend. So um, yeah, without going through my long resume, that's
Oh, that's great. Great.
kind of how I landed here.
How old were you when you made that decision to go do the MBA? Like, I think, with our group and our audience, we've got some people very early in their career. We've maybe got some people that are actually in doctoral programs. So where did you make that? That's the first question, and then I got a couple of drill downs too after that.
Yeah, so I was probably about almost 5 years out of my my first master's degree. So I must have been about 25, pretty close to 28 maybe.
Okay.
Just not gonna at 30. Yeah.
And did you, Lee, feel the MBA was essential? How did you determine that that was kind of, because you had a master's degree already, right? So undergrad, master's, now you're thinking about another educational pursuit to make that pivot, if you will. Why was that the path that you chose to go down?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I had to be very honest with myself about is that as much as I think people can be entrepreneurial in business, I still think there's a certain conservative perspective that you have to be able to kind of understand some of the um, basic principles that really drive business. That you have to also, and consulting is another one where people pay a lot of money to bring you in, and when they do, they want to know that you can deliver on whatever it is they're asking for. I needed to stop, and even though I thought I had the skills, and I believe I still did, I needed to be able to kind of ground myself in a certain signal that told people, yes, I'm a business professional. But I also needed to take the time to kind of layer in a few experiences that help people understand the jump. Because I think it's a stretch to go from higher education where your framework is really academic, and a lot
Mhm.
of the terminology is more academic in its nomenclature and its taxonomy. And then to be able to kind of translate that, I had to do the work for people. They weren't going to do it for me. So the MBA allowed me the opportunity to not only get the disciplines that were kind of, just common for everybody to have in business, but it allowed me the opportunity to kind of build that story that this is why what I did here is also translatable there. And so I was able to, through um, summer experiences, through class experiences, to really kind of lay the foundations and build the case. And also educate myself on the language of how do I tell this story in a way that people kind of understand that. So it was a 2-year investment, which I thought paid off pretty well.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, both you and I know, I think, the consulting environment X years ago and the avenues of recruiting maybe were a little bit different than they are in the marketplace today. And I think everybody should know that some of those entry points, I think, were a bit more fixed, right?
Yeah.
20 some, 15, 20 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, and this is something we're facing even now as we look to bring in talent into our consulting organization. Even though it's internal, I see a lot more just-in-time opportunities, so we're not necessarily beholden to an academic recruiting schedule. Additionally, I'm finding a lot more organizations are willing to take a gamble on those people who don't necessarily present with the traditional background, and so
Mm,
the Deloittes, the McKinseys, the whatnots, they're looking for a lot of just bright people.
yeah.
And so if you come with an education background, which I think I could actually have made the jump now without actually going
Mhm.
through an MBA versus when I was actually going into the market.
So you talked a little bit about the research you did and the self-assessment. I think this is one of the questions that comes a lot. And for some of the group that registered for our webinar, we ask like what career challenges. How did you do the research? How did you think about it for yourself? How did you go about figuring out what it was going to take to make that transition? Give a little bit of a deep dive on that.
Yeah, um, I used a couple of different avenues. One, I combed my network to find out who was kind of doing what I wanted to do. And I literally went out. And I was lucky in that my network included a fair number of consultants who were in the healthcare space. So I did a lot of interviewing to better understand the state of the industry right now. What did they do to get where they were going? And I shared my background and I said, uh, I asked them a lot about what would it take for me to kind of make that jump. And so they were very honest with me and shared a lot of things about translatable skills, the ability to kind of converse in the way that they conversed as consultants. But they also said there are some basic skills you're going to need, and you have to be honest with yourself to determine do you have those skills. And so um, I did a lot of soul searching. And I realized there were some deficits that I needed to really kind of shore up more than anything. And so then it was high time to find the right program. What kind of educational background or educational experience would I need to kind of fill those gaps? And what kind of environment would I want to kind of grow in as a new business professional, if you will?
Mhm.
Um, I could have applied to a very large program where I felt like I would have actually gotten lost and probably would have been more frustrated competing with people probably who had all of those things in their toolkit at the time versus an environment where there were a lot of career changers, and so we really kind of supported one another in making those jumps into internships and full-time positions. So all said, it took probably a good year and a half to really kind of get to the point where I felt comfortable applying and actually going into my MBA program.
And you said something th- that got my attention. You had people in your network. So this is a two-part question. How did you have people in your network in the first place that were consultants in healthcare when you work in higher ed? And then secondly, maybe a little bit of reflection. What would you advise people to do if they don't have that network now and they want to do what you did? So kind of in hindsight, like if you had not had those resources.
Yeah, so it's funny when we talk about networking, I think it has such a certain context when we think about it in business. And when I talk about network back then, it was just what were my friends doing? And
Mm,
I was, um, I was the person who kind of stayed in touch with a lot of the people that I graduated with. And that's where a lot of my network really was. Originally was people who had graduated with me and kind of moved on. And I, um, kind of trolled back through and kind of found out where are they doing and would periodically stay in touch like hey, how's it going? And so my network at that time was really, it wasn't broad like it is now, but it was literally people who I knew had graduated with me and had moved into different careers. And it was so varied. And so that was kind of the nice thing, was that people were doing a little bit of everything. And if I didn't know someone, they knew someone who did. And so
Mhm.
the idea was, could you tell me who is doing this that I could talk to? And they were happy to open the door. So same networking principles even then. For those who don't have that network, you can always start it. The question really is, who in your immediate circle is kind of doing some of these things that are adjacent to what you want to do or close to it? And if it's not exactly on the nose, can you reach out and even explain what you're trying to do and then ask for an introduction? Um, a lot of us come from colleges with very robust career centers. And so the ability to kind of go back and um, even meet with a career counselor to kind of say, within our university network, can you help me connect with people who are doing these things that I'd like to do, and have them help facilitate an introduction? So jumpstarting the network is not as hard as people think. I think it just requires a little bit of energy, and a little bit of thought about where you want to, spend some of your time.
The other thing you said that I wanted to maybe have you expand on, you you asked this question kind of from a place of, I know I have gaps. What would it take? It feels like that's exposing yourself, your weaknesses. There's some insecurities perhaps that you have knowing that, you don't have what it takes. I mean, how did you feel comfortable and confident having that discussion while you were doing this networking?
Yeah, I think part of what I I had to get comfortable with the fact was that where I saw myself going would require a few things that, either I had and I kind of lined up, these are the things I know I can do. And when I talked to people who were doing the things that I want to do, and they were clear that, you know, a much more, and I'll use an example, a much more strenuous exposure in finance, some of those basic tenets are going to be necessary. And you can read a book, but it's not the same as kind of sitting in a classroom and having a teacher kind of walk you through and really kind of engaging in that area. Um, I think part of it is choosing your network of people who are going to care enough about giving you the unvarnished truth, but also care enough to really give you that in a way that's supportive rather than dismissive. Um, and then I think when you realize that, simply to get there to wherever the endpoint is will require a little bit of investment in time. I saw it as just like a challenge, and it's something that I thought was, something I could take on and easily do. I wasn't trying to be a brain surgeon.
Yeah.
That's that's you can do it, but that's a very long investment that probably would be a little bit more of a challenge. And but I think I was honest with myself because I know I wanted to kind of make that leap. And I think if you're not willing to kind of be honest with yourself, making the leap is kind of pointless. You're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but I think you surround yourself with people who are going to care enough in your vision and really support you. It makes it a whole lot easier to share that, but then they also are cheering for you to actually do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know one of the things that we talked about, you talking about, is the I wish I had done, some of the lessons learned. Now a few years later, when you look in the rearview mirror, I mean, what's the advice you want to pass on? What do you think are things that if you had done them, maybe it would have supported your journey a little bit better?
Yeah, it's funny when you said, "Oh, I did this so elegantly." I it may have looked elegant, but I know that I could definitely see there were points where I could have done things a little bit differently. Um, I have a strong network. One of the things I wish I had done better and earlier was to um, convene what I call, my personal board of directors. Um, and I heard somebody use that term before, and I think it's a lot more common now than when I was, just coming out of my MBA program, which is a set of individuals, and it's not a large group, maybe 4 or 5 individuals who are people that you really turn to with some of the more critical decisions that you have to make, who can help you really kind of understand your career, where you want to go, hold you accountable to goals that you're setting, um, and then really kind of give you good direction and feedback, things to consider when you make these critical decisions. I'm lucky, I think, in my career, I've landed well. Um, I've not made use of a personal board of directors as well as I should have, or earlier enough in my career to probably have unearthed some really interesting opportunities that would have advanced my career a lot more, even further than it is now. But I would encourage anybody, it's never too early. You're never, you don't have to be an executive to have one. In
Yeah.
fact, anyone can have a personal board of directors. Um, and if it's somebody, these are people who are outside, could be outside your career goal, outside your career aspiration, outside your organizations that you're working on, but they're trusted individuals who are going to be truthful and honest with you, and challenge you and really make you think, coach you, and really kind of give you good food for thought when you come to making those critical decisions that you have to make. Um, so that was one that I really wish I'd done more of. And I serve on boards of directors for lots of staff now, younger people, but I wish I had taken advantage of that before, while I was in my MBA program. Um,
And
the
how would you do that? Like explain, I know it's maybe seems kind of simple, but how do you go about building that? How do you engage with the people and what's those conversations look like?
Yeah, I mean, these are, well, first of all, I kind of I have a short list of people. I would start with, who do you think fits that bill? Who's going to be honest with you? Who's going to care about your career? Who do you think is going to invest a little bit of time in you? And I think when you cut it, you boil it down, that list probably is not very long at all, which is good because it's manageable. Um, and then I looked for a lot of variety in experiences there. I looked for a lot of different kinds of backgrounds. So I didn't want anybody to be the same. I wanted them to be different because they have different perspectives. And then I just sat down over coffee and I said, I trust your judgment. I value your opinion, your thoughts, and I'm looking to really kind of pull together just a small group of people who will help me with my blind spots, help me understand what I'm not seeing in some of the situations I will face. Is that something you might be interested in? And I kind of, created like a small little contract with them. I didn't necessarily want to bother them every day. Maybe it was periodically that we got together, but I got their buy-in and they said, sure, I would love to be a part of that group. And so um, there are probably four people that I continually go to even now, just to really kind of, share these thoughts. And they're very candid and they're very honest. And sometimes they're painful because I make mistakes and I have to own those. And nobody wants to look like they're truly failing, but um, I give them all of it. And they're able to really kind of help me. And yeah, you could have done that better. What do you think about this? And they'll coach me. So, um, yeah, but the more honest and open you can be, the better that experience is going to be with your board of directors.
And do you see this group different than mentors? I mean, I think people, we get a lot of messaging about have mentors and have, that mentoring relationship. Is this something you see as distinct from mentors in addition, in place of? What's your perspective?
I see them as, to me, a mentor and a coach tends to be a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more involved with your experience on a more regular basis. Whereas your board of directors, it's like the board of directors at your company meets maybe twice a year. And so those are things that are much more high level, critical, and they're able to have the objectivity to really kind of question some things and challenge you to think through those things. A mentor can be on that board, but I wouldn't recommend having your board just be all mentors. You want enough objectivity and space to have somebody really be able to challenge you in a way that is maybe outside of your normal thinking. Um, they won't always agree with you, and
Yeah.
that's okay. And I think there's enough emotional distance to kind of, sometimes kind of call you on your stuff and say, I think you're trying to pull a fast one here. You're fooling yourself. Let's be real. And so um, I think that's kind of that's kind of how I think of it. It's like your board of directors or your company. They don't meet every day,
Yeah.
um, but there's enough variety there to really kind of bring about well-rounded thinking.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about it this way, Lee. I mean, in the seat that I sit in, I have an advisory board for our company, and when I'm thinking through things or I'm trying to, decipher a situation, I mean, I'm very much doing what you're doing. And for somebody who's kind of distant from the scene, that objectivity is critical. And occasionally, you get that comment back, well, you maybe are thinking about this not the right way or not fully. And it's having, right, another voice that challenges you, which sometimes we need that as professionals, right? To push
Hmm.
ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's, as a consultant, I mean, you think about our role as consultants when we meet with our clients, we're trying to not be so in their world that we can't step back and bring in disparate thinking that helps them kind of see their issues in much more well-rounded relief. And that's kind of the same role as the board of directors for me. They're trying to help me see this in ways that maybe I hadn't quite considered. And so the distance is really necessary. And that's something I think I've learned that, being a consultant, I needed that. So
Yeah.
I'm not so in the weeds with my client on everything that I can't give them objective feedback and thought.
Yeah. So we often have a lot of the individuals in our audience that are interested in consulting, and you in your introduction talked a little bit about consulting versus internal consulting. Could you maybe do a compare and contrast? Like it may have been a while back, but a week in the life of Lee as a Deloitte consultant versus internally at Blue Cross Blue Shield. I know your level's a little bit different, but for somebody who's thinking about a career path in consulting, what might be some of the high points that would allow people to see that you can have this longer consulting career, and it might be both a traditional consultant and an internal consultant.
Yeah. You know, um, I remember as an external consultant, first of all, I remember thinking, this is the gig, this is the best life, and so um, my life as an external consultant really was, um, and we were on site. We would meet with our teams and kind of talk about what are we going to achieve today, what are we going to work on. It's kind of the daily scrum. Who's going to be tackling what's the deliverable that we're shooting for, and then we would break, and then oftentimes it was client meetings, working on deliverables, um, you know, get presenting to key client executives around various statuses, and then actually working through the team's goals that we're going to have for the rest of the week. And so every day was something kind of different, but it was very similar to that. Um, I couldn't even conceive of what an internal consulting role would look like. And so it wasn't until I actually talked with some friends who were doing it and realized their day sounded so much like mine. They would meet with their teams, talk about their deliverables. What do we need to achieve for today? Even though your client was literally just internal, the concept is still the same. Somebody wanted a deliverable, they needed help with something. They would do an intake, kind of talk through what are we going to help this client with, and um, okay, we're going to have this meeting with this client, we're going to do that. And then everybody breaks in, they do their thing, and you do status calls and you meet with clients and you go talk with them. And so, interestingly enough, a lot of the things that I did as an external consultant, I do internally. The only other thing that I have to kind of layer in is that I'm also an employee. And so there are other things that I also have to take care of as an employee. So I have my internal training requirements that I have to get done. I have to attend town halls from the CEO. Um, the level of attention to detail is still the same. You want to perform well, you want to deliver well, you want to at least kind of give them the quality of information and deliverables that they can expect from an external consultant. Because we're often competing against the McKinseys and Deloittes who want to do this work internally. So the quality has to be exactly the same, if not better. The thing that I have benefit in is that I have access to information that Deloitte would never have, which makes my job a little bit easier to do
Mhm.
because I'm an employee and I'm trusted with this information, whereas Deloitte has to be cleared to get a lot of the same information.
Interesting. And you mentioned that your team at times is looking at hiring. What are you looking for? Like now that you're in the hiring seat, and if there's people that are interested in, like you, having a career in healthcare and consulting for healthcare, what do you want to see in somebody's background?
Um, that's a good question because we're looking at a lot of resumes now. The things that we tend to look for, you don't necessarily have to have been a consultant, but the ability to kind of think like a consultant is helpful. So the ability to kind of take a problem, break it down, understand it, ask the right questions about what you're trying to solve for, the ability to develop hypotheses, test those out with data or analysis, and then the ability to present that information in a way that's impactful to allow us to actually utilize that information to kind of make changes in our organization. So if you don't have an interest in really kind of problem solving, that does show through, and that's not going to be the person who's going to thrive very well in this kind of an organization. So, like a consultant likes to really kind of delve into a problem externally, we look for the same kinds of interests and skill sets that way.
Sweet. So not to take a complete left turn, but there was another element, when you and I were kind of planning for this conversation. And I just want to have you talk for a few minutes about your experiences around diversity and inclusion. And I think what I loved about what you said is I want to think about what I say on this topic. And I think that's just an honest, like that's one of my favorite Lee Clark things. So where do you even begin? I mean, this is such a huge topic. It's clearly something you have personal experience with. What are you thinking about right now?
Um, you know, one, I have to stop and think about how is my experience with diversity colored by who I am? And I mean to use that phrase, colored by who I am. You know, um, as an African American man in business, um, there are things that I've come to expect, in part because I know business. While I think there's again kind of this entrepreneurial spirit, I also realize that it's run by people who may not necessarily look like me, um, may not necessarily have my same life experience, and all of those things I bring to the table. And in a way, I hope it's value added, but oftentimes people have to want that voice in the room for me to even get in the door. So there's kind of a reality when I got to Deloitte. As much as I loved my experience there, I didn't see a lot of partners who looked like me,
Mhm.
and I had to stop and kind of take a look at that and think, what is that going to mean for my career progression? What is that going to mean for my opportunities at these different assignments? Um, who's going to invest time in me as my counselor? Um, And for those who may not have worked in consulting yet, you're often assigned someone who's kind of your direct,
Yeah.
not supervisor, but somebody who kind of oversees your experience in the firm, your counselor. And would that person really kind of take interest in my career success? Will they go to bat for me when it comes to mid-year and end-of-year performance evaluation? And all of those things really kind of made me really kind of cognizant that as a young Black man, I may not necessarily have the same experience as some of my peers. I, I may not have the opportunities as some of my colleagues. But what that simply meant for me was that I needed to show up in a way that was always prepared, always on top of my game. I didn't complain about a lot, but I wanted to make sure that I presented the best that I could for my client, my boss, made sure that I was invested in their success. Um, but it also meant that I needed to be very clear that, some things may not necessarily go the way that I wanted them to. And I would have to make some decisions in some places to really kind of determine if I was going to stay there or not based on that. Uh, but yeah, it's
Do you feel, Lee, that pressure of being prepared, was that above and beyond some of your peers? Did you feel that pressure?
um, I did, whether that's self-imposed or not, I did. And I think that's something that shows up for a lot of young people of color throughout their academic experience. You want to make sure that everything is tight. And so, um, and it only adds pressure in a consulting experience where everybody's type A. You want to make sure everybody wants to do that. So it fit right in. The question came down to, um, will my career be mentored and shaped and molded in a way that is going to ensure my success by people who had the power to really kind of do that. And there were some who were fabulous. They were fantastic and really poured a lot of energy into making sure that I got those opportunities. And there were some who, quite honestly, didn't give two squats whether I did or not because I didn't necessarily look like them. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of a reality. It's kind of a
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah, I mean, certainly my experience is quite different. But even in consulting, looking around, I did the same that you did. I looked above me and seeing female partners, they were few and far between. Their pathways were different than mine, and I wonder now that you're in a leadership role, how does this influence your mentoring? Like when you think about some of the advice you're giving younger professionals, what are you encouraging them to think about and maybe activate in their work?
Yeah. Um, so I still always give the excellent speech to them. You want to present something with excellence. Everybody deserves that. If you're presenting something to your clients, always do it with excellence. It doesn't matter who you are. That part never goes away. This is where having your board of directors is important. As a young person of color, um, find people who are going to give you perspectives that maybe you can't see. They're going to offer you these ideas and opportunities to kind of see the world in ways maybe that your blind spots really kind of keep hidden from you. Um, and then also, be in touch with your own values. Understand why you're doing what you're doing. Be true to that because at some point in time, you will have to make decisions about whether you stay within an organization or not for whatever reason. Um, whether you take a promotion for whatever reason. But be true to who you are and your values. I tell my majority colleagues, look, you know what? Everybody wants to get ahead. Let's be clear that while we hope it's a meritocracy, you still have control over a lot of what happens to a lot of younger staff. So let's be clear about our own blind spots and be sure that we offer equitable opportunities to everybody, whether it be young people of color, women, it doesn't matter. Let's be equitable all around the board. And I challenge some of my colleagues to kind of think about that. Invest in people in a way that helps everybody feel like they're getting access to these opportunities, because everybody just wants a chance to kind of really kind of flourish. So let's make that available to everyone.
Yeah. So everybody, we have about 15 minutes left. I have a few more
Wow.
questions, Lee, but if you have questions, take yourself off mute, put them in the chat. Would certainly love to feed some things. I'm going to go through while some of that is coming. Lee, I'm going to go through my lightning questions.
Okay.
Lightning questions. Okay. Favorite book?
Um, the Kite Runner by
Ooh,
Khaled Hosseini. Yeah.
nice.
Do I have to answer why? Do I have to answer why?
If you have a quick why, yeah.
Um, it talked about the power of choice and dedication and um, being really true and honest with oneself. That really spoke to me in that book.
Awesome. A travel destination you would like to go to on your list.
I crossed Wimbledon off. We did that one already. I'd
Lee and I have
say,
a shared love of tennis, and we went to Wimbledon with a
um,
small group.
yeah, I'd say Kenya. I'd love to go on safari.
Amazing. Favorite safari animal you'd want to see?
Um, if I could see a wombat, I would love to, but I think my son would say a lion. So,
Nice. What is your perfect Sunday, Lee? What does a Sunday in the Clark household look like for you?
oh, perfect. Um, get up late, um, have breakfast at a really nice, greasy spoon diner with my family. Um, then we actually go to the park and hang out for a little bit, play a little bit, come back, take a nap. Those are rare. Um, and then spend some time actually reading a book. If I could read a book in the afternoon, and then, just slowly wind down, getting everybody ready for Monday. That would be perfect.
I love it. I love it. What is something that you are extremely proud of? Like if you had a billboard and it's like it was the award for, what is that?
Um, I take great pride in launching many successful careers of junior staff members. It sounds kind of hokey, but
Mm,
that's the combination of my education experience and my business career. I have staff who leave my team and they go off and they do amazing things. They get promoted. They're doing amazingly passionate things in business. And I had somebody come back and said, I really learned a lot working with you. Thank you.
that's awesome. A question from one of the folks in our audience. Thank you, Thembi. Outside of the problem solving, what quality or qualities have you seen the most successful, kind of aspiring young consultants possess? What do you think is that skill set?
Uh, oh, yeah. Funny enough, I just said goodbye to a team member. She was a young analyst. She's now at Yale. She went off and she's doing business school at Yale. But what really kind of set her apart that I really kind of valued in her was her natural curiosity about things. She was relentless with questions. She was able to kind of pull together a lot of disparate things that were related in ways that maybe we hadn't thought. Um, and she was not shy, and she was willing to kind of put herself out there.
Mm,
And she was readily client facing probably within the first year of being on our team because of her ability to kind of ask really thoughtful questions. And I think she's going to do well. She's going to be, if I can get her back here, it'd be amazing.
yeah, I mean, this element of curiosity, I have a chance to speak with people a lot about that are aspiring consultants, and I think you and I both know, having worked in this field for a while, it is kind of a secret sauce. How does it apply? Like, give an example of how that skill of curiosity can really make a difference in maybe some of the project work that you've had people do or you've done.
Yeah. So, and I'll use this analyst. I think she had some good experiences in this. We put her on a project where she really needed to help understand um, this particular Medicaid process. So I'll get wonky for a second. It was all about redetermination. She had no experience in Medicaid, but she went in with the idea that she wanted to learn some things. So not only should she do her homework about Medicaid, she said, I just want to understand Medicaid. Where can I go? I gave her some information. She started doing research in the press about redetermination. Why is it important? How does it happen? What does it really mean? And then when she went into the client meeting, she had two or three key questions she wanted to ask. And I thought that was really kind of impressive. And so she would listen, and her questions kind of changed because of the information she was able to synthesize. And she said, you know what, given the pandemic, and this has happened, she said, when they turn off the funding for this pandemic support, what is going to happen to all of the Medicaid membership? Are we in trouble because we're going to lose these people? And the the director stopped for a moment and she said, that's a lot of people. We hadn't really thought through what a strategy could be to get ahead of this, which turned into a whole nother project. So it's
Wow,
just the natural curiosity and the ability to kind of take everything. She didn't have to know a lot, but she did her homework and she asked some key questions and started putting together all of these pieces that made her super effective in helping our client executive think about things in a new way.
that's
So
awesome.
that's kind of a good example.
Yeah, I love that because it just, it reminds me, Lee and I have kids roughly the same age, and like they are the essence of curiosity, right?
Nonstop.
And, I think at times we lose some of that as grown-ups.
Hmm.
But it really is a difference maker in business. And I think that's something with somebody with inexperience, those questions just, they're powerful. And to have, as you describe, somebody at a higher level kind of have an aha moment or almost like a holy shit moment, um, it's awesome.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
So back to my lightning questions in our last couple of moments. And again, if our audience has a few more questions, fire them out. So Lee, spicy or sweet?
Both, both
Yeah,
together.
I'm not surprised by that. Um, what is a skill you want to build for the next stage of your career?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would say that I believe the next stage of my career is really going to be about um, kind of framing up thoughts and thought leadership, especially around, the distant future. We're moving into a lot of strategic discussions here. And so I'd like the ability to really kind of take some of this information and really kind of fashion more strong thought leadership, and really kind of become more of a futurist and really
Mm,
kind of call out what would that look like if we wanted to be this kind of an organization? What would it be? What would it mean to us, um, from a capabilities perspective, from a skills perspective? What is that going to mean for us? What would it look like in the marketplace? And it's the ability to kind of take this information and really kind of fashion futuristic thinking that's not
mm,
just strategic, but really kind of puts us out there. So,
I love that, Lee. So there was a question about sharing Lee's address. What I'm gonna suggest, and hopefully Lee doesn't pound me for saying this. Lee's on LinkedIn, and you guys can, sometimes I intentionally avoid giving out people's email addresses because I don't have stock in LinkedIn or Microsoft. Well, I actually might have stock in. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But use LinkedIn, um, and that way you guys, have that proactive approach and use the good skills of networking. And of course, there's one question, and then I'm gonna ask one kind of closing question. How do you stay grounded? Like, what's your passion? What's a hobby? Like, what are you doing to kind of keep it all real and slightly calm? Where I think a lot of people are struggling with that these days.
do you want my kids? They keep me they keep me grounded. You know what? Um, I I do a lot of meditation, and I get up every morning and I have about 45 minutes of quiet where I really kind of, practice this. It sounds very new agey. I practice kind of gratitude. I came from a background where, I'm first generation college. My parents, my mother had an eighth grade education. My father graduated high school, and so there wasn't a lot of educational attainment, but there was value in education. Um, And so I practice a lot of gratitude. I think I'm really blessed and fortunate with what I have. So I start there. And so I also then think about what ways do I reach out, and every day is how do I invest in someone else? So not just my own career, but how do I invest in someone else? And I want to close every day by thinking through, was I able to achieve that goal? And so that keeps me grounded, and I realize, I'm here to help others.
So my last question for you, Lee, as we close, what is one thing that you would love to dedicate your work to change in healthcare? Like, what is the thing that you think could really make a difference? And, if you had a chance to work on that extensively, what would it be?
Um, I would like the opportunity to work on kind of helping to rectify some of the inequities in access to solid health care, especially for people who can't afford it. And I think that will either be policy work or pure operations. But I imagine my career will eventually see me moving out of for profit into nonprofit work.
Amazing, amazing. And, I think that's really important. I know that, you certainly have the skills and the capabilities to do it. And, I'm always your champion too. So
Thank you.
amazing, amazing. Well, I want to thank you, Lee. I mean, it's so great to see you. I hope everybody who's listening enjoyed this conversation. I always learn something. I'm inspired, I'm reminded. So thank you, Lee, for sharing your thoughts and being with us for this hour today.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure, and I look to connect with everybody on LinkedIn, and let's support one another.
Awesome. All right, Lee.
All
Take
right.
care.